authoritarian type of government is the people in a free society must retain the right to judge the law. Where they don't have the right to judge the law, you will have the authoritarian, the dictatorship type of government. In this nation, the judges, the congressmen, the president are not going to tell you that you have the right to judge the law. That's your job and mine, is to reach our countrymen with that information. The fact that we have the right to judge the law. Another question, what is common law? There is considerable confusion about common law. There are two very well-defined kinds of common law. One is called English common law. The other is called Anglo-Saxon common law. And they are directly opposite of each other. If you will look in your volume 1 of your revised codes of the state of California, I believe every single state has the same clause. Volume 1, right very nearly to the beginning of the book, you will see this. It will read like this. It will say, if a controversy arises not covered by the statutes of your state, you revert back to the English common law. The English common law says that the people are down here and that the government is free. The English common law says that the government has the authority. The Anglo-Saxon common law, that's where your grand juries and your trial juries came into being. The Anglo-Saxon common law says that the people, that they are sovereign, and that the king or the government is subject to the people. Now that's quite a difference, isn't it? Remember I said there's only two kinds of government? You have government controlled by people, or people controlled by government. That's the only kind. I don't care what kind of a label you put on it, democracy, Nazism, socialism, communism, or whatever. You see, it doesn't make any difference if you are executed by a bullet in the back of the head. It doesn't make one bit of difference to you. You're dead. It isn't going to make any difference whether that bullet says democracy. That's what happened to Vicki Weaver up in northern Idaho. That was a democracy. And her son Sammy shot in the back. That bullet said democracy on it. Those people down there in Waco, all those little kids, murdered. It had democracy written all over that atrocity. It could have had communist label on it. It doesn't make any difference. Waco happened because we the people lost control of our government. Common law. I talk about the laws of common sense. Every individual out there, if they have normal mental capacity, has it right between their heads, right between their ears. It's there. Why? Because your God Creator put it there. Your mother at your mother's knee should have been teaching you the difference between right and wrong. They should be teaching you right from wrong in the schools, but that's why we have problems in our schools today, because they say, oh, we can't teach these values. The government schools have to go. The laws of common sense, those are laws that we have readily available, and we function under those laws every day of our lives. Here's the one about the district attorney fired the head of the grand jury, and I've already touched on that. Here's one that's kind of close to my heart. How can your research into the improper ratification of the 16th Amendment gain judicial notice? It was in 1980, June of 1980, I was talking on the phone late at night with a fellow up in Montana who had become very active because of our television specials. And we were talking and discussing things, and of course I was using, way back then, I was challenging audiences to tell me one time where our tax-consuming public servants had told us the truth on any major story in this century. I recited that long list of lies many, many times, even on national television. We've been on satellite television before. They lied about Pearl Harbor, Korea, Vietnam, Social Security, energy shortage, Watergate, Kennedy assassination, and on and on and on. And this fellow says, you don't suppose they lied to us about the ratification of the 16th Amendment? That is the amendment that supposedly gave the Congress the power to lay a tax on our incomes. I said, Sam, we have to know. From their track record, we have to understand, we have to know that it is a fraud. He said, we better get the evidence. We better collect the research. We better research this. We better collect the evidence. We better get the legislative journals from the 48 states that we had in 1913. And so that was the birth of an ad hoc type of group of people that said, we're going to do research. We're going to collect the evidence of criminal activity by our public servants. And they started to gather up all of these legislative documents, the arguments, the debates, I should say, and the votes of the various state legislatures. By the time I wrote my book, Born Again Republic, in 1981, we knew that the 16th Amendment had not been ratified. The evidence had not been completed until January of '83. And when I took it into federal court the first time in March of '83, they refused to accept it because they said it was not certified. So, Mr. Bill Benson from South Holland, in the Chicago area, South Holland, Illinois, he went out and went to all of the 48 states. Judge Moody in federal court in June of 1980, I testified, and he said, you've got to have a witness that will testify that he's gone to all the states and gathered all this information. They put up a bunch of hoops for us to jump through, and we jumped through every single one, and it cost us about $100 grand to do it. But when Bill Benson completed the journey, the sojourn across the United States, we had over 17,000 certified documents. We put this book together, Volume 1, The Law That Never Was. Back there about 19...
Oops.
1987, every single congressman, every senator was given a copy of this book with their name gold embossed on the cover. This is a beautiful book. I'm not one bit ashamed of it, I'll tell you that. We are not going to get this evidence out here and make it work until we can get a grand jury in this country that will take this evidence and start indicting federal judges for violation of their oath. They're violating Title 18, Section 4, misprision of felony. They're violating it every day in this country. Bill completed that evidence in Christmas Eve of 1984. We had this book out in April of 1985. And we have been confronting the courts across this land, the U.S. attorneys and the federal judges, since that time, And at this point in time, I am absolutely convinced that every federal judge and U.S. attorney in this country is guilty of a felony. It will not be corrected until we have our grand juries start investigating, researching, and then indicting these people for violations of the supreme law and the laws of our land. This is why we must inform our fellow Americans with the truth that I have brought to you at this time. Thank you, and go out and let's do the job.
Welcome back to the second segment. We're talking with Douglas Dietrich about his time as a research librarian at the DOD. And we left off with some pretty big claims from Douglas. We're going to continue hearing more about this, of course. I want to ask you how much of this you actually can talk about, or if you did not sign a disclosure agreement, or in violation of everything you're talking about currently. Are there certain things that are off limits? I think this would be pretty interesting to listen to.
I really appreciate your asking that. It's important to emphasize the fact that I always caveat normally whenever I'm doing any interviews, especially when we get into the areas of talking about history and forbidden history or hidden history or occulted history. The obvious question is, what about security clearances? You were a Department of Defense research librarian. Initially, I started as a librarian's aide, graduated to the level of military reference technician, but because my educational level within a very short period of time was a full-fledged Department of Defense research librarian. Now, during that entire period of time, I held the absolute rock bottom of security clearances. I never got beyond top secret. It was nothing to brag about. As I said, that's the same kind of security clearance that would be given to anybody who's working on open military base, and pretty much is given access to a few other areas that normal civilians aren't given access to. It's meaningless. The only reason that I got exposed to so much of what I was exposed to is because of that enormous corruption, stupidity, laziness, and incompetence of the U.S. government, of which I have spoken. The only thing that keeps the United States government functioning is its sheer wealth. The wealth and resources of the nation itself, the wealth and resources of the rest of the world, which it essentially occupies. And as a result, they can afford to literally get away with murder, literally get away with anything. And by murder, I'm saying that metaphorically too, where people are not doing any work. Well, how does that happen? Well, a lot of it happens by basically putting all of the responsibilities on the person below you. Well, the lower down the ranks you are, the more work you do or are forced to do. So the end result is that I was naive enough to think I wanted a career with the DOD, to think that it would actually get me someplace. It took me almost a decade to realize they were never going to give me anything. And the end result was that I didn't need a security clearance to be exposed to all this, because the men who had them, such as my operations manager at the Presidio Military Base Library, weren't doing any work and just passed it all on to me. And basically they would say, handle this. I'd say, well, that has a security level that I'm not supposed to access. And, well, I don't care, handle it. You know, you just do it. I'm not going to do it. You do it. You want the job, right? It went on and on. And basically, it got to the point where, in the case of the Roswell files, which we might save for another show, it's per your discretion, we might touch on that today. The problem is that, like any real history, it would be like describing all of World War II. How would you do that unless, you know, at least you get an entire show that outline that?
Right,
but
right.
The Roswell files give you a perspective on how they were about this sort of security clearance issue. Was basically Roswell incident took place, of course, in 1947, before there was an Air Force. There was no U.S. Air Force at the time. There was the U.S. Army Air Corps. So even though the documents and files were kept at the what is known today as Area 51, or what used to be affiliated with Travis Army Airfield, that entire region within Nevada, they basically were still under Army auspice, because it occurred during a time when it was under Army responsibility at the Roswell Army Airfield, etc. And Strategic Air Command at that time was still part of the U.S. Army under the Air Corps. So the commandant of the Presidio military base wanted access to the Roswell files. This was part of an ongoing project that had to do with Colonel Michael Aquino. Colonel Michael Aquino, when he was in Vietnam, and at that time, of course, he wasn't a colonel, and indeed all the time I worked with him, he was only a lieutenant colonel. He later retired a colonel. But at any rate, when he was in Vietnam and he was still a relatively low-ranking officer, it was 1969, Sergeant Melvin Brown began to talk. Sergeant Melvin Brown turned around to his family when men landed on the moon and said, I worked with enemy aliens, and I looked under the tarp. They told me not to look at the bodies at Roswell, but I looked at them, and they were yellow, burnt orange, and they turned gray with rigor mortis. And his family just took that automatically to be extraterrestrials. And then the U.S. Army called Colonel Aquino back, and they said, hey, we want you to work with this. We originally said it was a disc, and everybody got this space feel about it. We took a Gallup poll, found out that 90% of the population, city of Gallup, which takes the Gallup poll, by the way, is in New Mexico. It is in the same state as Roswell. And so they said we found out 90% of the American population believes in flying saucers. That's the highest ratings they've ever had before or since for anything. And they said, we want you to work with this and see if you can really make it stick. And so he started this whole psyops where he chronically needed to access Roswell materials. So finally, the commandant of the Presidio military base ordered the Roswell files to be delivered to the Presidio military base. So I get walked into the room where they were sent to by my operations manager, and he said, hey, Douglas, look at these. And I looked at them, and they were all these big locker boxes, and they all had on them Crypto Cosmic Top Secret. I thought it was a joke, and stapled to each one of those labels was another word, above. Above Crypto Cosmic Top Secret. I said, sir, I don't have any security clearances that would ever give me permission to look at these materials. I could spend the rest of my life in jail just for seeing these. And he said, Dietrich, you get to work on those materials, collating those documents for the commandant of this base right now, or I'm going to tell the military police you try to walk out with some of those materials in those boxes under your armpit, and you will spend the rest of your life in jail. And I said, well, sir, I don't think. Yeah, that's right, Dietrich, you don't think. You work for the government. That's how it always was. That just epitomizes it. Another example, you got Colonel Aquino himself. He, because of his international security clearances, could access, say, for instance, military libraries, not only here, but in South Africa, in Canada, in anywhere within the British Commonwealth of Nations, such as Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom itself. And he used to order grimoires, or occult tomes, from various militarily financed universities. And all universities in the U.S. that are reputable get military finance. And many universities in other countries are the same way, because they access their student body for research. In other words, their professors will do research for them, scientists, etc. So what they did was he would contact universities, various libraries that were federally affiliated, and of course other military libraries, and from these, even museums, because museums would often get a lot of government grants or funding. He would say, I need this occult tome, this grimoire, the old word for grammar, the old occult ritual magic books. Some of them were put together before there was a Gutenberg printing press. They were literally priceless. Some of them were bound in human skin. Some of them were written in human blood. And you couldn't even open them, because they kept them in refrigerated safes in these museums. They wouldn't even let professors open them, because that would compromise the integrity of the book itself. It would disintegrate or crumble. And basically, he would access these from these libraries saying, this is international security. This is an international security issue. That's how he would get access. They would deliver it to the library like it was fine china with a courier. And because he ordered them through the OCLC, the Online Cataloging and Library Cooperation Program, that's what existed in those days, because he would use that system, they had to stay in the library. So because of that, Colonel Aquino conducted all of his major rituals whenever he had to use these grimoires for such in the library. They could not leave the library grounds. So he followed the rules to that extent. So he would have many officers come in to conduct rituals on site, the Presidio military base library, and we're talking about 9 to 13 men at a time that would come in to these covens and gatherings. I never saw a single one that was underneath the rank of major.
Now, did you see this with your own eyes, or does this come from documentation that now then consequently has been destroyed? Or are there any paper trail for any of this?
Oh, absolutely. Well, like I said, on my DVD, Satan's Crusaders, part of that DVD set that we're selling through the website, and believe me, there's very few of those left. We got pretty much cleared out the inventory with the UFOCon, so I'm telling you the truth when I say that there's less than half 100 left, if that, so please get them while you can. Yes, I got the photo, because we'll try and put them into a book later or do something with it, but we have to get them out of that DVD format because it's just not good to keep it in a format like that. But the point is that I have photographs of the various elements of this, such as the results of sacrifice. To put this into perspective for you, the Presidio military base was site of Letterman Army Medical Center. Letterman Army Medical Center was where they trained the vast majority of Army doctors. 25% at least of all Army doctors at any one time were trained or graduated from the Letterman Army Medical Center. Now, Letterman Army Medical Center had an unholy alliance and arrangement with the California prison system. To give you an idea of how large the penitentiary system is in the United States, the California prison system's prison guards are the highest paid law enforcement officers in the world. Think about what I'm saying. The highest paid law enforcement officers in the world are California prison guards. That's how powerful a union they have. These are people who live, they literally buy yachts. I'm not kidding. And so this prison system, through the governor of the state of California, made an arrangement with the U.S. Army that prisoners could be given revocation of death sentences, gubernatorial pardons, shortening of prison sentences, prison privileges, or even release if they volunteered for experimentation with the United States Army. So they would have various prisoners who would go in for experiments. Some of them were quite funny. There was this one where they fed these people nothing but salmon burgers, salmon tofu, salmon everything for months. Now, how did I know about this? Because I was a DoD librarian who had to liaison and cooperate with the medical librarians at the Letterman Army Medical Center. So I would say, oh, these are personnel records. They don't belong here. Had to take them over to the Letterman Army Medical Center library. So the medical library also had to bring things to me, which were like division records, etc. Oh, this goes here. So I was constantly working in liaison with the librarians at the Letterman Army Medical Center medical library. And at times I had to spell them or relieve them. I often worked at the medical library. So I often met these people. Many times they were brought to the main library because the medical library was so specialized. So they'd bring them to the main library because they had to give them something to read. So these prisoners would be living on base in the hospital for months. They'd have nothing to eat but salmon, per this one example I'm giving you. And they'd come, and whether they were black, African American, or Caucasian, white, European American, they would come in and their skin would be orange. And I said, what the hell happened to you? Oh, it's the salmon. They feed us nothing but salmon. And I'd have to hide all the candy bars. I'd have to hide the sandwiches, anything, because they'd try and grab it. And they always had MP escorts, so they wouldn't try to escape. They were escorted by military police, give them reading materials, then they'd go back to the prisons, their holding cells in the Letterman Army Medical Center. That was just moderately funny. But there were other cases, such as the ones I took photographs of that are in my DVD, where these prisoners disappeared. Their records disappeared. Later on, their head would be found somewhere on the base. That's the level of sinister talk that we're talking about. The sinister occurrences that we're talking about, excuse me. And there would, it just goes on. I mean, I speak about the medical experimentation at the military base. I met one of those prisoners even before I worked as a librarian, to give you an example, where I was a patient because I was a military dependent. My father was a veteran of over 30 years of service in 3 wars. He was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And with over 30 years of service in the U.S. Navy, I had full access as a military dependent to taking advantage of medical treatment at the Letterman Army Medical Center. So all the while I grew up in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, whenever I was sick, which was often because of the filthy environment that the Tenderloin presented, I was at the Letterman Army Medical Center. One time I had bleeding duodenal ulcers. This was just before I became a librarian's aide, and I was about just over 15 years old. And while I was in there for a few weeks while they gave me a full blood transfusion, and I had to let it take, and there were infections, etc., basically what had happened was there was a woman who was being kept in the hospital who apparently was undergoing one of these experiments. She'd been a prisoner who made a deal to get herself released if she underwent some experimentation. Now, her head was totally shaven. She used to come in to visit me, and she had a microchip. That's what I would recognize it as today. Back in those days, I didn't even know what it was. Implanted right at the base of her skull, right on top of her spine, at the tip of her spine, right where the spinal column and the base of the skull connect. Very bizarre. I never even found out her name. That, again, that was before I worked as a librarian. But that's the kind of situation we're talking about at Letterman Army Medical Center. So, in terms of security clearances, I hope that puts it into perspective for you, where we've got a situation where I didn't, it wasn't that I had one. And so everything I saw was, I was working with under protest, I was never supposed to see it, it was all based on government corruption and stupidity. And whoever thinks, because I get this all the time, people say, oh, they misdirected you with this misinformation. They're feeding you all this misinformation. It's crazy, because I never spoke of it. Keep in mind, I left the Presidio military base in 1992, was the last year I worked there.
Mm-hmm.
They closed the entire base down in 1995, and that's when I anonymously came out with some of the Roswell materials. That led into enormous repercussions that most people are unfamiliar with, and then I didn't speak about it again until literally around the year 2008. So we're talking about around 2008. So if they chose someone to spread misinformation, they chose the wrong man, because I never spoke about it for decades, and the chances of my getting hit by a truck or getting killed with all the contract work I was doing were extremely high. So the idea that I would survive being a disinformation agent is absurd. All the odds were against me. If they took a risk on me, they banked on the wrong guy. Well, now all their nightmares have come home. And as a result, my ability to talk is what really threatens them. And people ask, well, how do you stay alive? Because all the while I was liaising with Colonel Aquino, I essentially was someone he wanted as his heir apparent. He was outspoken about that. He took me to the 1st Earth Battalion Satanic Monastery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at one point. And he had often brought up the fact that I would make a well-rounded black magician and a good member of his church. And as I said, he's still essentially neighbors with me. He lives on Leavenworth Street here in San Francisco. I live on Green Street. We're only a few blocks apart. I could walk to his home anytime. We've been neighbors forever. And I don't speak to him anymore. I haven't spoken to him since I stopped working at the library at the Presidio military base back in 1992. And but the reality is, that's why Laurie and Fenton wouldn't let me talk to the super soldiers until we met at the summit itself, because they looked on me as someone to loathe and to fear. I had worked with the whole super soldier phenomena from the Predator's perspective. And
I've heard Aquino, by the way, throughout the years now as well. He's vehemently denied all of this, and he seems to be very disheartened about all of these claims made against him. I'm seeing him sitting on TV. I've seen, if that's even him, of course, but not on TV, but online, actually, apparently in email conversations with people. And so he's not willing to talk about that if any of this is true.
Oh, well, I'll put it into perspective for you. He was certainly adamantly trying to pursue lawsuits against the many people who were speaking about him and talking about what happened with these various programs. And as a matter of fact, one of the first internet content providers to ever exist, back when DARPA first released the internet, was a company known as Electricity. It was spelled E-L-E-C-T-R-I-C-I-T-I. And Electricity was sued by Colonel Aquino for defamation of character because they released information.
Ja, då tar ni.
Ja kato, kun mulla on rahaa takana niin paljon. Eiks niin? Se on ihan... Joo, niin tässä juttelin äidin kanssa. Niin on se hyvä, kun on niin välittävä ja rakastava äiti. Sitä ei oo se. Mutta katsotaan, jos mä nyt löydän sen Joo, tässä on se äiti kulta soitti mulle. Ops, se osaa käyttää. Mikä? Koko. Hetkinen, missä se nyt on? Tossa. Mitä?
Tänne tuli taas lisää sun laskuja, kasvulaskuja siitä, kun et sä oot lyhentänyt sitä velan lyhennystä.
Mitä velan lyhennystä?
No mikä sulla on vuosia pankkiin?
Okei, no. Moi.
Niin.
Moi.
Pankkilupa laittaa sitä realisointiin, jos ei sitä makseta.
No, sitten laittaa realisointiin.
Niin ei se ole yhtään väliä.
Ei oo mitään väliä.
Joo, kun ei makseta aina katsotaan, niin silloin se menee sinne realisointiin.
No, sit se menee. No. Olis muuta.
Voi sä noin huonosti noi asiat hoida.
Mä hoidan helvetin hyvin.
Älä hoida, kun minkä tulee kaikki sun laskut. 800 tuli sähkölaskua.
No kun eikö sä nyt ymmärrä, että te aiheutitte sen, että mä joudun sieltä talot lähtemään.
Missä sä olet nyt?
No se ei vittu kuulu sulle, mutta mä olen vielä Suomessa tällä hetkellä. Tuossa aika rajalla olen, mutta olen Suomen puolella.
Onko siellä tyhjänä se talo siellä?
No. Niin, kun tehän siis sinä ja Antti, tai siis te ja Antti, aiheutti sen, että mä joudun lähteä siltä talosta, eikö niin?
Niinhän me aiottu, kun sä saa sähkölaskuja.
Kyllä, ja sitten, hei, kuuntele nyt. Eli poliisilla on tutkintapyyntö ollut sisällä jo vähän aikaa. Eli sieltä kuuluu teille tai jossain. Se on hidastana oikeuden rattaa Suomessa. Voi mennä niinku kevääseen jonnekin, mutta jossain vaiheessa teille tulee haaste. Joo. No kyllä, tällaisen tutkijan kanssa juttelin silloin, kun mä vein sen tutkintapyynnön, niin kyllä se sanoi, että tämä vaikuttaa vakavalta, mutta te tutkitaan.
Eihän se nyt rupea sokaan liikeleen.
Joo, että perästä kuuluu, niin kuin vanha kanssa sanoi, että perästä kuuluu.
No vieläks Jussi huopottaa sua?
Miten niin huopottaa? Me saavuttiin Jussin kanssa tuossa, milloin se oli, viikko takaperin.
Missä päin?
Vuorossassa. Oltiin Lehtovirran Karin tykönä saunassa. Kun Lehtovirta pyysi mua saunomaan, niin mä sanoin, että kun mulla pitäisi ottaa Jussin mukaan, niin mä olin siellä saunomassa. Ne oli ihan kiva.
No niin, rupes minä vaan.
Joo.
Talo menee alta, kun ei mitään hoida hommiansa.
Siis te olette aiheuttanut sen, että se talo menee alta.
Eikä oo.
Kyllä. Ja mua vituttaa, että mä hävin siinä rahaa, mutta mä oon tavallaan, mä lähden tällä hetkellä siitä, että mä en saa penniäkään siitä talosta. Mä oon oman budjettini ja niin omat rahaseni, niin mä oon lähtenyt siitä, että mä en saa sieltä mitään.
Saakka, kun nää peritään kaikki sulta.
Mitkä peritään?
Mitä me maksetaan?
Ei se mene ihan, ei mene ihan niin.
Kyllä menee, kun tuomari on sanonut.
No kuule, tuomarit voi olla mitä ne haluaa. Kun mullakin on tuomari. Niin, tää asia näin niin.
Mutta mitä että sä et voida laskuja, kun pitää siellä kupissa, kun...
Siinä mä käyn pupeissa kyllä, joo.
Niin. Sä rahat sinne ja sit sun menee talon alta. Niin se kaikki sanoo. Nahallakin sanoo silloin jo, että ei se sitä pysty pitämään.
Hei. Eikö sä kuunnellut nyt, kun kun sen talon, mä lähden siitä, että mä en saa sen tekniikka sit talon omasta.
No se on ihan hyvä.
Joo. Mut ette saamaan tekää. Eiks niin? menee miinukselle. Tää menee miinukselle, kuule teillä pahasti. Joo, se välittäjä soitti mulle, mikä päivä se soitti. Siitä on jokunen päivä aikaa. Niin on tulos katsojia. Mun ei ole pakko suostua. Ja arvaa jos mä suostun. Koska mä just sanoin sulle, että mä oon lähtenyt siitä, että mä en näe penniäkään siitä talosta. Mutta ette näe tekään. Mä tunnen ajalta niin solmuun tämän tilanteen, tiiäksä. Niin vitun solmuun. Joo. Kato, mä joskus sanoin, eiks niin? Muistaakseni? Että mulla on kaikki. Hei, mulla on kaikki lähtenyt vaan pikkuhiljaa siitä. Ja kun tää homma on ohi. Niin mä oon vedelleen huoppilassa. Sitten tää on koko. Kyllä se on tavallaan päätetty asia.
Jussiko se sua oikein hooppi?
Ei, kun mulla on niinku se tässä on ystäviä.
Kukaan enää viljele siellä Perkiössä maata, ne on kaikki vuokralla.
Joo.
Ei Rauno, ei kukaan.
Tiedätkö sä mihin tää päättyy? Haluatko sä nyt kuulla? Mä voin kertoa sulle mihin tää päättyy.
No niin.
Mä olen sillä alueella. Mä tuun ostaa ne kaikki tilat sieltä. Se Rämön ja sen koko sen vitun alueen. Se tarpeen siellä maanviljelijässä. Tää on se. Meneekö siihen? Siis on, mä tiedän varmasti, että se on niinku vuoteen 2020 mennessä. Sen mä tiedän varmasti. Tarkka ajankohta. Kato kun tää nyt etenetään. Kato kun tähän kuvioon niin...
Ei ole rahaa saanut.
Ei saakaan ilman rahaa. Mut kun mulla on rahaa takana. Nämä monet asiat on päätetty. Mutta kato kun tää etenee tää koko, sit kun te ootte vaan pikku osa tätä koko hommaa. Te ootte sellainen kärpäsen paska tässä niinku koko hommassa. Ihan sama. Te ootte ihan sama. Teillä on mitään merkitystä. Ei Anttila. Te ootte niin pieniä tekijöitä tässä koko hommassa. Teillä ei ole mitään merkitystä. Lähes siitä. Ja te olette aikoinaan tehnyt omat valintanne ja se on teidän asia. Mä oon tehnyt omani, te olette tehnyt omanne. Ja kato, kun tässä maailmassa jokainen joutuu kantaa sitten ne seuraukset niistä omista valinnoista. Joo. No, itse asiassa mä oon ollut hyvin.
Kuinka että kaksi ihmistä pärjää, kun Arja käy töissä ja sulla on hyvä eläke ja... Niin kuinka että pärjää? Meidän täytyy tehdä laskelmat.
Hei. Te olette niin paljon pilannut mun elämääni. Te olette niin paljon aiheuttanut mun turhia kustannuksia. Te olette niin paljon valheella toimittanut mun hoitoon. Ja sitä kautta tuhonneet mun elämääni. Niin sä kehtaat vielä kysyä multa. Miksi mulla oli tiukkaa? Enää.
Sulla oli... Koska mun kuvillakin, kun sulla on ollut nätti perhe ja lapset ja koti ja kaikki sä tuhosit niillä huumeilla ja viinolla ja... Monta kertaa me käytiin silloin, kun sä olit innostunut. Ja sit sä toisit sinne vieraita naisia johan aikana.
Ketä vieraita naisia mä johan aikana toin?
No, sä itse puhuit.
Ei. Siis mä autoin sitä naista, kun se oli tulossa.
Niin. No on se aika, joka on aika monen, kun joka sitä syöttää ja ruokkii ja sä pelaat niiden kanssa. Kävit siellä pornovuorossa, mä en muista, kun sellainenkin lasku maksettiin, oliko se jotain toista tonnia.
Mikä pornovuoro? Mikä lasku? Ei kerro nyt, mä en muista. Kerro nyt.
No siitä on niin vanha, että en minäkään muista, mutta se on jossain siellä Nickneyrin takana, missä sä sanoit, että se on.
Missä? Nickneyrin?
Nickneyrin. Niin sä sanoit.
Klapsi. Joo.
No niin. Siihen käytettiin vain kuinka paljon rahaa, ettei hakannut sua.
On kaukas hakannut.
No niin. Lopetetaan nyt.
Ei ne varmaan hakaa. Toi nyt ihan sun keksimä juttu. Toi nyt ei pidä paikkaansa.
Kuule Kari, mä sanon tämän.
Mä kuuntelen jo, mä kuuntelen.
Että kun me jumpikumpi tai kumpikin kuollaan, ja älä tuu meidän haudalle. Mä pistän semmoset partiomiehet sinne hautausmaalle, että sä jalanlaskatus sinne.
Mä tuun käymään, ei.
Se on ihan sama.
Mä tuun käymään teidän haudalla. Mä tuon seppeleessä.
Saatana, et tuu.
Varmaan tulee. Ihan 100 varmaan tulee.
No, täällä on kuule partioliikkeitä, vaikka kuinka paljon, niin mä pistän 10 liikettä sinne ympärille.
Millähän rahalla sä sen teet?
No kyllä, mulla on kesällä rahaa.
Joo, mutta kato kun sä tuo partioliikkeestä suurin osa on mun ystäviä.
Ja Jussi on ihan sama. Ja toi suku tuolla,
Mikä suku?
missä sä käyt koko ajan.
Mikä suku?
Kyllä sä tiedät, Jussin suku.
No hei, muistatko sä kato, kun Mattihan kuoli tuossa vähän käsittääkseni?
Niin.
Arvaa, miksi se kuoli?
No,
Koska mä menin sinne Arjen kanssa juttelemaan ja se heittäytyi hankalaksi. Mä annan ohjeen, että Tommi, se pitää kuolla. Ja se kuoli. Kato, kun mulla on kaikki valta.
ei pidä paikkaa.
Kyllä. On monta tapaa. Hei, on monta tapaa tappaa. Ihmisiä pystyy tapattaa niin, että siitä ei jää mitään jälkeen. Se on mukaan luonnollinen kuolema. Se on ihan hyvä. Se on ihan vitun helppo järjestää.
No saisit säkin semmoisen luonnollisen kuoleman, saatana, kun kiusaat meitä koko ajan.
Miten mä nyt oon kiusannut? Mä oon vielä omia asioitani hoitanut. Niin, mä oon ihan omia asioitani hoitanut. Te mua kiusaatte,
Mä
kun...
järjestää sulle jokin, jos ei luonnollinen kuolema, että päästään sinusta.
No, kato, tää on vapaa maailma, sit sopii yrittää. Mä oon moni yrittänyt tappaa kuule. Moni on yrittänyt tappaa, mä oon aina selvinnyt.
Että sä pikkunainen saatana perkele.
Niin kato, kun... Siis mulla oli siis 10 kertaa mut yritetty tapattaa. Mä aina
Sä
sit...
on Arja.
Ja Arja niin lähti käymään ton kaupassa. Se lähti
Mä
kauppaan
sanoin
käymään.
Arjallekin, että miksi ette te hoida laskuja.
No voithan sä sen soittaa ja sanoo niin. Voithan sä Arjetta soittaa. Ei se oo kielletty. Ei se oo kuitenkaan kielletty.
No me ei makseta nyt tätä pankin laskua, niin sieltä tulee se realisointi sitten.
Niin, mutta eikö sä ikinä kuuntele, mitä mä sanon? Mä jo aikaa sitten päätin, että kun mä tajusin mitä peliä te pelaatte, niin mä niin koittaa ihan samaa. Ja kato, kun mulla on rahaa takana niin paljon, eiks niin? Se on ihan sama.
Mistä sä maksat sit laskuja, jos sulla on rahaa niin paljon on?
No mä en ihan kiusallaan maksa niitä lyhennyksiä. Ihan tarkoituksella en maksa.
Matti soittaa, niin mä pyysin sieltä päin soittamaan, kun ei viitti lähteä sinä asti ajamaan, niin jos soittaa joku päivä nyt, niin me
Ei, miten niin lähtee ajamaan? En edes tiedä maksaa.
Ei, mutta me ei lähdetä. Nummelan nopea.
Etteikö te niinku ajaa enää osaa vai pysty ajamaan vai? Onko se auto rikki?
Ihan turhan takia lähteä ajamaan, kun ei meillä saa hoidettua.
Joo, okei, hyvä. Erittäin hyvä. Täällä on muuten hemmetikoinen keli. Kyllä mä nyt sanon.
Missä sä olet sitten?
No me ollaan täällä Pohjois-Karjalassa. Nyt vähän lomailla.
Arjan kanssa.
Joo, ja me lähdettiin, kun mihin on kelit päätettiin, että otetaan vähän lomaa. Tää on aivan upeet. Niin upeet.
No tuli mieleeni semmoinen, että niitä puheviestejä on ihan turha laittaa, koska mä en saa niistä mitään selvää, ne on vaan itisee ja ei ne ole kunnossa.
Mitä tulee?
Niin mä sain niistä selvää.
Mitä tulee viestejä?
Sä oot laittanut noita puheviestejä.
Ei oo. Ei mä laittanut mitään puheviestejä. Ei oo laittanut. Se on ihan fakta.
Ei kukaan muuta niitä laittaa, ei oo ikinä laittanut.
No se voisi olla yksi meidän henkilöistä, mä en omaa tietoa.
Ei sieltä mitään selvää saa, niitä on turha laittaa, kun toisen kun
semmoista asiaa, että te olette noin niinku, ymmärrätkö, teiltä niinku, mulla on ihan sama. Mutta se on ihan mahdollista, se on aika iso operaatio menossa. Niin ihan mahdollista, koska mä olin siis ei mun tarvi niin kun muut hoitaa asioita teidän suhteen ja Antin suhteen. Aika paljon. Mutta mä oikeastaan vähän, mä voisin sanoa isompi. Mä oon antanut ohjeen, että teille ei saa tapahtua nyt mitään, koska ennen kuin mä haluan. Mutta kiusata sanoa. Näin mä oon ohjeistanut.
Niin, mutta ne kaikki on tuomareilla ja poliiseilla, mitä sä silloin aikanaan viestitit, ja sä viestitit, että ei sun kädet ole vedessä, että ne on muiden kädet, kun tappaa meidät. Ne on kaikki tuolla.
Mä oon aika...
Satoja.
Joo, ehkä mä oon tommosen mennyt paljastaa joskus, mutta se on totuus. Näin se on.
Niin.
Näin se on.
Niin.
Mut kato, mä oon myöskin silloin kun viimeksi tätä teidän asiaa käsiteltiin, sit on nyt jo aikaa. Kun mä oon nyt tän teidän asian niin laittanut ihan sinne jonnekin taustalle, kun te ootte niin pikku... Teillä ei ole mitään merkitystä, niin tän kuvion kanssa, mikä kanssa mä teen töitä. Teillä ei ole mitään merkitystä. Mut mä oon sanonut, että mä haluan semmosen tilanteen, että Paloniemessä on potilaina sinä, iskä, Antti, se Oskari, se muija, se Rutta Perse ja Johanna. Ja sit me istumme siellä ja sitten puhutaan. Ja jos ette puhu, niin te olette sen niin kauan, kun te puhutte.
No mitä meillä on puhuttavaa? Ei mitään.
Nämä kaikki asiat selvitetään. Ihan kaikki.
Mistä asiat?
Kaikki asiat. Mulla on paljon kysymyksiä. Mä oon tosin tiedä jo suurimpaan osaan vastauksen, mutta mä haluan kuulla ne teidän suusta.
Niin.
Niin sen takia teille ei voi tapahtua mitään ennen kuin tämmönen tilanne on. Eli
No mikä se oli semmonen tuolla Facebookissa, kun sä itse puhut, että jos menis vaikka lomalle Paloniemeen tai Nimpaan? Mikä semmonen on?
No se oli vitsi. Kaikki muut sen ymmärsi, paitsi te. Se oli vitsi. Mut kyllä mehän käytiin Arjen kanssa niin Kuopiossa. Niuvassa.
Niin.
Moikkaamassa sitä ylilääkäristä Tero Hallikaista tulomatkalla.
Aha.
Joo. Koska se Tero Hallikainen pelasti mun henkeni.
Aha.
Niin. Se otti riskin silloin. Sen oma ura oli vaarassa. Mutta se tosi hyvin ja ovelasti pelasti mun henkeni siitä tilanteesta.
No niin.
Ja Paloniemen on suljettu. Jos niin, ei ole enää Paloniemen. Se odottaa teitä.
Joo.
Milloin se on se? Mulla niinku sinänsä, kun mä tiedän, että miten nämä asiat etenee, mulla ei mikään kiire. Mutta mä vaan niinku kerron sulle, mitä tulee tapahtumaan. Ihan tarkkaa aikataulua mä en tiedä, koska mä en yksin päätä sitä. Mutta mä tiedän, että vuoteen 2020 mennessä, niin mä pääsen eläkkeelle sit majussiksi tonne Kuopioon. Sen mä tiedän. Että onko se... Niin mitä?
No mitä sä siellä viljelet?
Mitä nyt on? Kauraohraa?
Eikä sulla ole mitään koneita, ei sulla ole mitään.
Niitä saa kaupasta.
Älä semmosia turhaa kellekään juttele, ne nauraa sulle.
Ei ne kuule naura.
Kyllä ne nauraa.
Ei naura.
Kaikkihan sillä nauraa. Tossa meillä on tuttuja ja ne lukee sun Facebookia.
Joo.
Ne sanoo, että tää olisi ilman muuta saatava suljetulle osastolle. Tää on aivan hullu.
No miksi mä oon sit jo siellä? Jos kaikki on sitä mieltä, niin miksi mä sit ole siellä? Tästä voidaan päätellä, tästä voidaan päätellä, että ihan kaikki ei ole sitä mieltä, koska mä en ole jo siellä. Mieti sitä.
Ja kaikki nauraa sun juttujasi ja meillä on paljon täällä ystäviä ja kavereita.
No ensinnäkin mä tiedän, äiti hyvä, että sulla ja isällä ei ole yhtään ystävää. Sen mä tiedän. Tiedän, koska mä oon paljon pyörän vuorossa. Mä tiedän, kun mä tiedän nämä asiat. Sulla ei ole yhtään ainutta semmoista aitoa kaveria. Nämä Antin kummet, Jussi ja joku Anneli, mikä se vittu on se toinen ämmä. Niin ne on kans. Eli koska ne on vastaan. Se on liitossa teidän kanssa. Siitä ei ihan täyttä varmuuttaa. Mutta niin. Kato, ei tässä, mä tiedän tämän kuvin. Ja sen mä tosiaan tiedän, että sulla ei ole ainuttakaan ystävää. Ei ainuttakaan.
Mulla on yksi ystävä ja hyvä ystävä.
No hyvä, että sulla olisi yksi. Mulla on aika paljon.
Niin, niitä oikein niitä, mitkä sua houkuttaa ja...
En mä ole huomannut mitään houkutusta.
Ei, kyllä
Mä en ole yhtään houkutusta huomannut. Niin.
No niin.
Ja sit semmonen asia, semmonen mikä mä sanon nyt tähän näin, on se, että isä, tai niin kutsuttu isä, niin se on niinku sun uhri kanssa. Se on sun uhri. Eli faija on tehnyt paljon mulle ikävää, mutta niin se johtuu sun manipuloinnista. Eiks niin? Eli jos se pitää paikkansa, mitä mulla on selvinnyt faijasta ja susta, niin kuin se pitää paikkansa.
Niin kuin Jussi ja nää oikein
mä tulen antaa Eerolle anteeksi kaiken. Niin kuin Eerolle. Koska se on uhri tässä hommassa. Se on uhri. Se saa anteeksi. Sä et saa anteeksi.
No, enää kaipaakaan.
Tajuaksä?
Minä kaipaan sun anteeksiantoa en missään vaiheessa. Ja mun ystävät on sanonut, että hylkään nyt jo semmonen.
Tajuaksä mikä se odottaa ollenkaan? Onko sä miettinyt sitä, mitä se odottaa?
Se odottaa mitä muitakin ihmisiä. Suorana. Joskus.
Niin, mutta kato kun... Eikö sä tajua sitä, miten se tutkee esimään? Paljon. Niin. Onko sä kuullut puhuttavan tulisesta järjestä?
Haista paskaa.
Se pitää paikkaansa, mä oon nähnyt sen.
Niin, isä on. Kato, mulla on lisää näyttäviä.
Joo, ja
Niin.
melkein mua niinku käy sääliksi, kun sä oot joutunut seksiin. Se on ihan hirveä, se on hirveä.
No se on hirveetä, kun mihin säkin joudut vielä.
Mihin mä joudun?
Sitä mun piti sanoa, että mitä noi lehtovirran pojat, mä en enää mene lehtovirralle. Mitään ostamaan. Sä siellä touhut ja ne tietää sun touhus, niin ne on karkottanut nyt, jos sä oot karkottanut mut lehtovirran asiakkaan.
Joo, no, mä voin ensi kerralla, kun Kari kanssa tavataan, niin kertoa, että mä otan, että sori, että sä menetit yhden asiakkaan, mutta sun sama naura.
Niin, no ei se, mutta kaikki niillä on karkottanut. Sä niitten miesten kanssa poikien
Hei. Musta tuntuu, että Kari on helpottunut, kun sä et enää käy siellä asiakkaana.
No se on hyvä.
Joo, mä luulen, että
Ihan oikein.
Kari on helpottunut, kun se ei ollut palvelemaan sua ja saatiin helvetin vaikea asia. On Karittelussa.
Täytyy ottaa Karin kanssa puheeksi.
Ota puheeksi. Ja sitten mä kävin muuten Alasen kanssa työmässä tässä täältä Pietilää. Milloin se oli 2 viikkoa sitten vai 3. Meillä oli hyvät keskustelut Pietilän kanssa. Se on asiallinen mies. Vähän on se kanssa puhelimessa jutellut usein, mutta mä otan Raamatkaisen kanssa jutellut.
Onko se lähettänyt sulle laskua?
Kuka? Pietilä?
Niin.
Minkä lasku se pitäisi mulle lähettää?
Yleensähän ne, jos niille soittaa tai ne soittaa, niin siinä tulee aina lasku.
Me juteltiin niinku kavereina. Teetkö sä itse kavereita laskut? onko se Fajan kuormaaja siellä Umppilas ehjät? Onko Faja käynyt koittamassa tuo Brysseliä? Eikä ole britit aina vähän koekäyttää, että ne pysyy kunnossa.
Älä semmosia murehdi, kun et saa muutakaan murehdi.
Eikö mä haluaisin sitä käydä katsomassa, että toimii se vielä? Mulla on siellä omat syyni kysyä näin.
Kuinka vastasin?
Ajattelin vaan, että on varmuus, että toimii vielä.
No niin. Se on meikin asioita, ne ei kuulu sulle.
Ei, kun mä ihan vaan näin. Ajattelin, että se on sinua aina varmistaa. Käy varmistaa, että tulee kunnossa. Mulla on vähän töitä, niin mä en jaksa sen. Voidaanko lopettaa?
Voidaan lopettaa.
Hyvä, moi.
Ei.
Kun en enää jaksa kävellä kotiin. vuonna keskimäärin kokonaisuudessaan 1656 €. Eläkkeen määrässä oli eroja niin miesten kuin naisten välillä ja myös alueellisesti. Puhelimessa on nyt Eläketurvakeskuksen tilastopäällikkö Tiina Palotie-Heino. Hyvää aamupäivää.
Hyvää huomenta kaikille.
Mikä oli päällimmäisin havaintosi tästä selvityksestä?
Ehkä se suurin havainto, mikä nyt tietenkään on iso uutinen, niin tämä keskimääräinen eläke, sehän on miehillä isompi kuin naisilla, mutta myöskin miesten eläkkeet jakautuu tasaisemmin eri tuloluokkiin. Naisilla eläkkeet painottuvat tuonne pienempiin eläkkeisiin sellaisetkin, ja niin myöskin ylempään työelämän eläkkeen saaja.
Miehet tosiaan saivat eläkettä lähes 1900 €, naiset noin 400 € vähemmän. Onko tämä ero kaventunut? Mitä sillä on käynyt?
Tuo ero on suhteellisesti noin 79%, ja se on ihan sama, mikä se oli vuosi sitten. 2 vuotta sitten se oli 78%, että hitaasti lähenevät toisiaan, mutta ovat aika kaukana vielä.
Miksi miesten ja naisten välisessä eläkkeessä on noin suuri ero?
No se johtuu siitä, että eläke määräytyy työuran pituuden mukaan ja myöskin työuran ansioiden mukaan. Ja naisilla keskimääräinen ansio on selvästi alhaisempi kuin miehillä, ja myöskin naisten työurat on edelleen jonkin verran lyhkäisempi kuin miehillä, mutta saavuttavat kyllä pikkuhiljaa. Näistä kahdesta tekijästä tämä johtuu.
Eläketurvakeskuksen tilastopäällikkö Tiina Palotie-Heino, katsotaan sitten hieman alueellisia eroja. Missä päin Suomea maksettiin pienimpiä eläkkeitä?
Pienemmät eläkkeet maksettiin Etelä-Pohjanmaalla ja myöskin Keski-Pohjanmaalla.
Entä sitten se toinen pää, eli suurimpia eläkkeitä?
No se on tämä Uusimaa edelleen ihan selkeästi, ja sitten toisaalta tulee Ahvenanmaa.
Eli onko tässä tapahtunut muutoksia?
Ei, tämä on aika vakiintunut tämä kuva ollut pidempäänkin jo.
No, tämä Eläketurvakeskuksen selitys kertoo myös, että kaikista Suomen 16 vuotta täyttäneistä eläkettä saavia on noin 1/3. Missä päin Suomea on eniten eläkeläisiä?
Edetään näitä eläkeläisiä on tuolla Itä-Suomessa ja erityisesti Etelä-Savossa, myöskin sitten Kainuussa ja Kymenlaaksossa. Täytyy huomata, että eläkeläinen tässä on sekä vanhuuseläkkeen saaja että työkyvyttömyyseläkkeen saaja.
Tässä selvityksessä oli tosiaan tietoa myös työkyvyttömyyseläkeläisistä. Miten heidän määränsä on muuttunut?
Tässä on ihan ilahduttava kehitys, joka on jatkunut. Työkyvyttömyyseläkkeiden määrä sekä suhteellisesti että absoluuttisesti luvut on laskenut takaisin vuosi vuodelta. Ja viime vuonna jokaisessa maakunnassa työkyvyttömyyseläkkeellä olevien osuus laski keskimäärin 6% työikäisestä väestöstä. Mutta erot on kyllä isot maakuntien välillä.
Missä maakunnassa oli eniten?
Kainuussa on eniten työkyvyttömyyseläkeläisiä, reilu 9% työikäisistä. Ja maalla sitten vajaa 4%.
Kiitoksia näistä tiedoista. Eläketurvakeskuksen tilastopäällikkö Tiina Palotie-Heino.
Kiitoksia.
Radio Suomen päivä.
Näin siis Tiina Palotie-Heino, ja jatketaan eläkeasioilla Radio Suomen päivässä 10:30 alueuutisten jälkeen. Saamme silloin studioon Suomen suurimman eläkeläisjärjestön Eläkeliiton toiminnanjohtaja Anssi Kempi. Ja kun tuota tilastoa tai tutkimusta tuossa aiemmin silmäilin ja uutisia siitä luin, niin Suomessa on ainoastaan yksi kunta, jossa naiset saavat enemmän eläkettä kuin miehet, ja se on Utsjoki. Mutta sitä, että miksi näin tapahtuu, niin sitä ei tämä selvitys kertonut. Mutta jatkamme siis tämän aiheen käsittelyä 10:30 alueuutisten jälkeen. Ja muistutan vielä tässä vaiheessa, että koska Kati Lahtinen, ohjelman toinen vakiojuontajista, on tänään niin sanotusti äärettömänä yhtiömiehenä, hän vastailee teidän kysymyksinne tuolla WhatsAppin puolella. Se numero on 0444210895. Sinne saatiin muun muassa jo eilisen ensimmäisen lähetyksen jälkeen kysymys, että nyt kun nämä asiajutut hajautetaan sinne tänne, toivon, että löydän Areenalta kuunneltavaksi niin nämä jutut jostain paikasta keskitetysti niin, että ne myös löytää. Niin kyllä vain löytää. Menkää Yle Areenaan, sieltä löytyy Radio Suomen päivän sivustot. Siellä ovat eilisen jutut ja sinne ilmestyvät myöhemmin myös tämän päivän jutut, ainakin parhaat niistä. Mutta nyt kohti kello 11.30 alueuutisia. Musiikilla mennään. Anna Puun, Venus ja Mars.
Helsingin poliisi tarttuu nuorison rikosilmiöihin perustamalla erillisen nuorisoryhmän. Tavoitteena on katkaista nuorten rikoskierre mahdollisimman aikaisin. Rikoskierteeseen joutuneelle nuorelle osoitetaan oma poliisi, joka tutkii kaikki häntä koskevat rikosepäilyt. Alle 18-vuotiaat nuoret syyllistyvät yleisimmin muun muassa näpistyksiin, pahoinpitelyihin ja vahingontekoihin. Ryhmän tutkinnanjohtajana aloittaa nettipoliisina tunnetuksi tullut rikoskomissario Marko Fors.
Näiden nuorten osalta, niin kyllähän ne on vielä huomattavasti alttiimpia sillä niin kuin hyvälle vaikuttamiselle, kun sitten semmoinen 10 vuotta rikoskierteen saanut henkilö, että kyllä täälläkin on niin kuin ns. Kovat kaverit, niin on jo kyyneleitä valuteltu, että vähän jutellaan syvällisemmin noita asioita, että kyllä siellä niin sillä lailla näkyy se, että osa heistä on tietyllä tapaa sellaisia oman elämänsä uhreja, koska ei ole ne lähtökohdat hyvät ja ei ole ollut niitä välittäviä vanhempia, niin kyllä se vaan niin näkyy tuosta noista jutuista osasta läpi.
Kauniaisissa nostetaan maan korkeimpia eläkkeitä. Kauniaisissa eläkkeensaajan keskimääräinen kuukausitulo on 3015 euroa. Uudellamaallakin Kauniainen on omassa luokassaan. Espoo ja Helsinki ovat kakkos- ja kolmossijoilla. Uudenmaan keskieläkkeet ovat maakuntien vertailussa maan korkeimmat eli vajaat 2000 euroa. Lähimmäksi ylletään Ahvenanmaalla. Koko maassa keskimääräinen eläke oli viime vuonna 1650 euroa kuussa. Pohjois-Espoon ja Leppävaaran bussilinjastoon suunnitellaan muutoksia. Tavoitteena on vahvistaa yhteyksiä Helsingin kantakaupunkiin ja muualle seudulle huomioiden toimivat työ- ja koulumatkayhteydet. Suunnitelmissa on esimerkiksi perustaa uusi runkolinja numero 200 Elielin-aukion, Leppävaaran ja Espoon keskuksen välille. Ajatuksena on, että runkolinja aloittaisi elokuussa vuonna 2020. Espoon kaupunki ei näe estettä Siikajärven kylän läntisen osan liittämisessä Espooseen. Alue kuuluu nykyään Kirkkonummen kuntaan, mutta Siikajärven kyläyhteisön edustajat toivovat liitosta Espooseen, johon alue on vahvasti sidoksissa. Asukkaiden mukaan Kirkkonummen suunnitelmat eivät tuo edes pitkällä tähtäimellä parannusta Siikajärven kaavoitukseen ja elinkeinon harjoittamiseen. Sää jatkuu selkeänä ja poutaisena. Iltapäivällä ja illalla saadaan paikoin lumikuuroja. Yöllä ja huomisaamuna sää on melko selkeä ja poutainen. Huomenna päivällä niin ikään lumikuuroja. Päivän lämpötila on tänään -1 – -4 astetta. Huomenna asteet vaihtelevat 0 – -3.
Information about these accusations against him. This went all the way up to the Superior Court of San Francisco, case 9844751, and he lost. Now, I know all this because I was his personal liaison, and as his personal liaison, I had to handle his correspondence. And I'm the individual who basically got him off from serving serious jail time because I basically was able to prove that physically he was never at the military base and all the child molestation went down. If you remember, I said there had to be many more besides Gary Hambright, the school teacher. Now, another lawsuit he lost was against the U.S. Army to the CIC, Criminal Investigations Division of the U.S. Army, to get his name off record from the allegations of child molestation at the Presidio Daycare Center. And he lost. So he's lost several lawsuits saying that he wasn't there, which is one reason why he is disheartened and doesn't pursue it too much further, and I can understand that. Now, this is the crux. All of the children who were at the Presidio Daycare Center described him to a T, physically. They described Gary Hambright who they knew as Maki. They described Colonel Aquino. They described his wife. Now, there's two ways to explain this. Either by location. Some people who are really into new technologies will claim holography. Another explanation potentially might be the tunnel system under the Presidio military base. Presidio military base was originally established by the conquistadors under the Pax Hispaniensis of the Spanish Empire. And it was over 200 years ago. The oldest building in San Francisco is the Presidio Officers Club, which is right across the street from the main postal library. And that was established in 1776. That means that the Presidio has buildings that are as old as the overwhelming majority of buildings on the east coast of the United States, over 200 years old. And the conquistadors enslaved the local tribe, the Ohlone tribe, O-H-L-O-N-E, Ohlone First Peoples Nation, the American Indians there, forced them to dig for gold. They dug enormous tunnels underneath the Presidio military base. Later on, when the United States, conquered from Mexico the captaincy of the Presidio, they took El Presidio and they expanded those tunnels and reinforced them so that they could carry enormous cannon, because the Presidio was the gateway to the Golden Gate of the San Francisco Bay Area. And at that time, until World War I, the population of San Francisco was 20 times that of Los Angeles. That was the only real American gateway to the Orient. So to guard this precious gateway, they set up all these underground cannons that could come out of the ground where the ships couldn't reach them and then bombard any incoming ships. So all these underground artillery bunkers were basically concretized, reinforced, and in the 1950s, after the Second World War was officially over with Japan, April 27th, 1952, when the Treaty of San Francisco went into effect, people can look this up. At any rate, at that time they began to concretize and lead line the tunnels in order to reinforce them against nuclear attack, and they kept Nike Zeus anti-ballistic missiles in them to guard the city against nuclear bombardment. Now, those tunnels still exist today. When the child daycare center scandal went down, all the children said they were taken into tunnels from one building to another, and to torture chambers, and tormented by robed figures bearing torches until they would remove their cowls and they would recognize these individuals and describe them. Now, the state of California, whatever you do, don't ever move to the state of California if you have children, because the state of California will not accept the eyewitness evidence of children. So all of the testimony was thrown out of court.
Okay.
And it's a perfect crime. So it's a perfect crime. You can do anything you want to kids, and their testimony does not count against you. End of story. That's how it works in California. Conceivably, Colonel Aquino was entering through the tunnel system without checking in with the military police at the gates. Because when the child daycare center scandal went down, my operations manager approached me directly, and he stood over my shoulder and made certain that I completed the task, ordered me to incinerate all of the maps of the Presidio tunnel systems. So I personally destroyed, with him watching over my shoulder, every single map. There is no map of the Presidio tunnel systems left.
Okay, well, that is interesting. How much of this now then have been destroyed, Douglas, overall, of all the different things we've been talking about here so far? Is much of the evidence for this now gone and buried, and it's basically only in your head, or is it still out there anywhere?
People can look up what they can. They'll certainly find out everything I say about Gary Willard Hambright is true. They'll certainly find out everything I say about the child daycare center is true. And all of this, of course, remember that this was a court case for years. So there was much testimony brought into the court, even though it was ultimately say the children's testimony was all thrown out. That's why they couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Also, it was federal. Back in those days, you couldn't sue the U.S. government. The tragedy is it was in the days before the internet. So they were able to hide it by transferring all those victimized families to the four corners of the earth. They transferred them to Panama, Okinawa, the Philippines, West Germany, everywhere, South Korea, and before they were all transferred, that's when they all got together and burned the daycare center to the ground. So, you know, people can look up the arsons concerning the Presidio, and they'll find out it's all true. I mean, it's all on record. But it was well hidden in the sense that because there was no internet functionally at the time, certainly not to the extent that we have today, the Army got away with it. And it wasn't the only place it was happening. At West Point, which is famous for graduating Army officers, the child daycare center building number was 666. And children were being raped and killed there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a spy who killed a girl who was like 20 months old. And he was set free with a dishonorable discharge. That's all he got. He didn't get any jail time. This is the kind of Army that we're talking about. So in terms of everything, you know, the man who investigated all the children that were being raped and molested there and said nothing was going on was Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani was put in charge of investigating the West Point incident. And I don't know why or what the connection was, but I remember his name essentially being connected. People can look that up. They can confirm it. Everything that I'm bringing up, feel free to confirm it and look it up yourself. And that kind of brings us to the 1st Earth Battalion. Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that a little bit more. Tell us about that. And you didn't have any involvement with them, did you?
I did, only in the sense that, remember, under orders, I was given liaison duties to Colonel Michael Aquino. And this was after the breakup of the military with Dr. Brown in terms of his work with the logical language after that U.S. Army Ranger was caught molesting these kids. I don't know what their family says about that, or the fact that this is what I was getting from the U.S. military. Since I knew the Ranger who admitted to the crime, that's where I'm getting that testimony from. His name was Lionel Allen Curtis, for what that's worth. U.S. Army Ranger sniper, Master Sergeant Lionel Allen Curtis, a convicted child molester, it needs to be emphasized, who was caught into that story. And
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Okay, we are back, and I am joined by tonight's very special guest. Finally, now just firstly, let me drag in the guys and Laura for tonight's very special show. And I'm absolutely made up because at one point there, I really did think we were struggling. But I've got Carolyn here, I've got Johnny Whistles coming in, and now we will bring in, last but not least, the one and only Laura Maxwell. But tonight we are joined by two guests. You've heard from Laura, and now we're going to hear from our other special guest, and her name is Carolyn Hamlet, and she's a former Illuminist born and raised in the Luciferian organisation responsible for the implementing the plan for the New World Order. The plan for the New World Order is a plan authored by Lucifer, who is Satan. Now, Caroline was used throughout her life in various capacities and departments in something called the Plan, which yielded to her a wide range of experiences and privy to classified information. And like I said before, you can find her work over at beyondthephysicalrealm.com. So, Caroline, at long last, welcome to the Kev Baker Show.
Thank you, Kev. I was wondering if I was going to even be able to be on the show tonight.
Well,
the way
you know,
things are working.
Over the course of this week, we've been speaking about things like dark forces, and I honestly thought those same dark forces were at work here. But we finally got here, and before we get started, how are you doing? You all ready to go?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Excellent stuff. So, tell us a bit about yourself, Carolyn. Who are you? Tell us about your childhood.
Childhood was quite busy. I had like a facade of that I was not to appear very intelligent, just pretty much below average person, and somebody that would not call too much attention to herself. So the people that I grew up with actually didn't really know me, And in fact, they probably would not even, a lot of people I grew up with would not even believe that I am the person that I am, because the reason I was used in the way that I was used was because I was able to keep secrets. And of course, part of it was that I took pride in it because of the family background. Also, in certain areas, my life was threatened if I spoke, and the lives of my loved ones was threatened. So, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics involved. So, you know, a few of my friends, like in high school, actually knew some of what I was into. I did have a couple of family members who knew that. But for the most part, my neighbors across the street, next door, they had no idea. Best friends had no idea. So that's just the way it works in an organization, in the bloodline, that not everybody in a family is chosen for the types of jobs that I was chosen for, and much of it did have to do with the supernatural, and some of it had to do with mind-controlled programming and having altars, and I mean, it's amazing the things that my life has touched because of the capacities I was used in. And the only reason I'm alive here, you know, today to speak about this is because there is a power greater than that organization I came out of, and I totally believe God wants me to expose the works of darkness, because everyone deserves to hear the truth. They absolutely do, and they need to hear that God is a loving God. He's not the God that has a social country club that tries to exclude people. It's a complete opposite. I'm sure in this program we'll get into more depth about that, but I just want people to know the truth. You know, I had my life stolen from me, and there's no reason for anybody to have their lives stolen from them, or the lives of their loved ones. So that's another reason why I just so appreciate you having me on the show tonight, and having Laura also on here with me, so that, you know, it's just that, you know, her testimony and my testimony, even though we grew up in different areas, and I'm a bit older, it's still the same old things that in the organization. They have the lives that they're promoting. It's a plan, and Laura and I both have very much in common. And I think that the listeners will be able to see that as this program progresses.
And I'm glad.
So thank you.
I'm glad we've got 3 hours tonight, and please don't thank me. I must thank you, and we are all lucky that people like you and Laura and others out there are here to pass on the information that you have. Now, I heard you talking about 2 words there that caught my attention: bloodline and organisation. These are 2 things that are going to be intertwined with everything we talk about tonight. Could you talk to us about what you actually mean by bloodline and organisation?
I will tell you what I was told. And it's a little different than what a lot of people have heard about. They hear the term Illuminati. I was told as a very, very small child, probably even I think as young as 2 years old, but definitely by the age of 4, I had a very in-depth understanding of the plan and the bloodline. The bloodline, I was told, was originally came from 3 main areas, and that we were not of human origin, that we came from, not only were we physically superior to humans, but we were spiritually superior. And spiritually meaning that we didn't even come from, this is what I was told, this is a lie, of course, about coming from a higher spiritual order that was not even involved in what they call, it's like reincarnation. Reincarnation's a lie. It's a lie. But what in the organization and the ones in the bloodline, they will tell them that they are from a higher order that aren't even in what they call it, group karma of Earth, of humans and Earth, that we were a much higher order. And of course Lucifer comes in with that, and Lucifer, there's different teachings about who he is, and Lucifer being light and coming from Venus. So I was told that Some of us came from Sirius, some from Venus, Alpha Centauri. There's some other places too, but there were three. I was told there were three main bloodlines, and that I was a combination, or my particular, mainly through my mother's side, was through a combination of the bloodlines.
Johnny, you want in here at this point?
Yeah, Kev, it was just to ask it. I had always been, well, kind of told that Satanism, it was in two categories. One of them called Lavean Satanism, and what they don't believe in Satan as a physical entity. And the other one is called Theistic Satanism, and they worship Satan as a deity. Is that true?
There's all different levels of teaching and understanding. Many different levels. And yeah, those are two levels. On my blog, I have a diagram that I put together. It's kind of a crude diagram, but it can give people a little bit of understanding of how the organization is divided up. That at the top, the very top, is Satan, who's Lucifer, and the people that get to the top find out that Satan and Lucifer are one and the same. There's different graduations of understanding from the very bottom levels up to the top. It's like what they do is illumination is actually they take away all the lies. You know the truth that's what being illumined is you know the truth, and you know what the truth is that Satan is Lucifer, and they let you know who Jesus Christ is. He's exactly what the Bible says he is. There's so many different levels they take you to, little by little. Like when you leave one level, they will say, okay, you've learned, I know we told you this at this level. However, you are advancing to the next level because you're more spiritually advanced now. Let us tell you why we told you that lie, so that now you can have even the higher truth. And it's like each level is actually its own particular hierarchy set up. It's like each level can actually operate independently of its own. But when you get to the top of that level, or they actually have a use for you, it's all about using people. They will take you out of that one level, and like the secret teaching, the people even below you may not, or let's say that you're in a specific level of understanding and teaching, you may still be a part of that particular level, and only you and the people and the beings or people above you will know that you've advanced. They don't always tell people and that they're associating with that they are advancing to the next level. See, the control is it's unbelievable. That's why I call it the organizations, because I've never found anything more organized. It just blows my mind about how organized it is. But the kingdom of heaven is more organized.
It really is an organization, and it sounds like an organism. It can operate independently or as a kind of together unit.
Yes.
And I want to bring in Laura at this point. And Laura, thank you so much for bringing this lady to TFR and the Kev Baker Show tonight, because as we've just heard there, this is going to be absolutely amazing, and the information that she has and you have is so important at this time. We were speaking to Bill Bean the other night. He was talking about the dark forces around us right now. So many other people talking about this kind of thing. And you yourself, you're an ex-spiritualist. And I want to get your take on what you heard Carolyn saying there, and how that marries up with the information that you've come across in your years researching these topics.
Yes, it's just such a great honour to be here, and you know that I really mean that. So thank you.
No, I thank you. Now get on with
it. Well, as you know, Bill Bean and myself and Kari Laine, we share the same belief and similar backgrounds in a sense with what we've been involved in. So yeah, really I can back up everything so far that Carolyn has said, because although I wasn't in the Illuminati or a Luciferian as such. I was a New Ager and a spiritualist, and it's really quite incredible how the teaching is practically identical. You know, everything that she was taught about global unity, universal consciousness, that every spiritual power on the planet is under the headship of Lucifer. I was taught that as well. So yeah, it's incredible how close the teaching. Basically, we were taught the same thing. We were chatting about it the other day. We were taught Christ consciousness, Madame Blavatsky, Theosophy, all of that, which I think just shows you when people say Satanism is nothing like New Age, that there are two different sources, one is black, one is white. I would argue no, it is all under Lucifer, because I was certainly taught that as a New Age spiritualist.
Wow, and you know, this New Age, some of the things that we hear in the New Age, from what I'm hearing from news people, it sounds to me like these New Age tools, maybe sometimes yoga and meditation, not that I claim these things, but could they be seen as tools of Satan? I'll come to you for that, Carol.
Absolutely. I just did actually a couple of programs, a couple of interviews that had to do with what is really the third eye was all about, and the pineal gland, the eye of Horus, and that was with Zen Garcia, Momentary Zen, and also with Tony from A Minute to Midnight, and that's midnight is spelled MIDNITE, and you can find that on YouTube. It's really, and, you know, in fact, there's some things about the chakras that I was talking with Laura about this, and I would really love for the audience to hear what she has to say, in addition to the information that I've been trying to put out about what actually is happening with why the pineal gland activation is being pushed today, even in Christian circles. That's part of the plan. I knew this when I was a 4-year-old kid, that they were going to start doing this. I was taught this back when I was as young as, I believe, 2 years old.
And I must admit, in the alternative media, it's something that we hear a lot. Activating the pineal gland, astral travelling out of it, out-of-body experiences. So yes, it definitely is something that's in the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah, that's part of the plan, and it's when I call it when I talk the plan, that's actually the name that Lucifer and the authors of this plan came up with. They call it the plan. That's what Madame Blavatsky called it. Alice A. Bailey, who had the books dictated to her through the Master D.K. de Walckwell. It's the plan to bring in Lucifer as Lord of this earth, and it's actually, you know, it's anti-God, it's anti-us when it comes down to it. It's anti-God's salvation plan for us. Salvation is true, and God sent. It's like what Jesus Christ is like I try to tell people. Try to put it simply, that is God's rescue plan. If people actually knew who we are spiritually to God that created the universe, and know what happened, there actually was a fall. We are not evolving. We are fallen creatures, and God has sent a rescue plan, and it took the Word Himself. If anybody takes a look at the Bible, at the book of John, just even look at John, the first chapter, they could see who exactly Jesus Christ is. Read the Bible in context. It's don't let one of these ascended masters that serves Satan to tell you what the Bible says.
And we're almost on the break, guys, and this is the first segment of what's going to be a 3-hour show. And when I was speaking to Laura today, I just knew that the Kev Baker show for 1 hour couldn't even scrape the surface. Now, when we come back on the other side, we're going to go to Laura, and she's going to add to what Carolyn was saying there. And this, trust me, is only the beginning of some information that is literally going to blow your mind. And we're going to expose this plan from this organisation tonight. we'll get into mind control, military operations, interdimensional espionage, and so much more. Right here on the Tech Baker Show on the #1 network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. Don't go anywhere. We haven't even...
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to what was a very strange start in Kev Baker Show. But we
rocky start.
Oh, there he is.
Yes, I'm back. Skype lost its mind, dude. What happened?
Man, where did you go? You were missing information about a plan from a Luciferian organization, Bloodlines. Joe, what was happening to you, dude?
I was in the abyss.
But you were saying to me, you know, we're talking spiritual attack, Joe. You're very tuned into this kind of thing yourself. Sure. Ange, we're sharing some experiences with me, Johnny, and all the guys off air at one point. Mm-hmm. Could it be that when you try to make a show like this, that there might be some dark forces playing games with us?
Yeah, you know what? There's no doubt they are, dude. Can I go about and definitively say, well, you know, was it a demon that went and caused the Skype hiccup? No, I don't know. You know, but I can tell you that whenever, especially whenever I feel led to or we're discussing things of this nature, it's interesting how these tend to happen. And you know, I don't believe in coinkydinks.
We don't do coinkydink on TFR. Now then, before the break, Carolyn was telling us about some of the new age tools that can be used by the dark side. And she was telling us that Laura will be able to expand on this, talk about the pineal gland, stuff like that. Laura, new age tools for the dark side. And you're muted, there she is.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I've maybe mentioned before on previous shows with you that it's really sad and it's tragic and such a deception, but a lot of new age tools that nowadays the general public use as well, so I shouldn't really use the word new age.
Isäntänsä tullut. Voi ruoasta kieltäydy. Tänään saatiin asiakkaan Ivalan konttorin Ristolta viestiä, että siellä on ollut vähän häikkää verkon kanssa. Totta kai toivotaan, että kyseessä on väärä hälytys. Ne ei ole nimittäin niitä kaikista kivoimpia keikkoja, jos löytyy vanhaa tekniikkaa, mikä hidastaa työntekoa tai pahimmillaan keskeyttää toiminnan kokonaan. Se on tosi ikävä juttu. No nyt näyttää kyllä tosi pahalta. Älä itke, Risto. Eihän mä itkekään. Ei siinä ole mitään hävettävää. Velo. Etsi ongelma, etsi. Yes. Hali. Ei. Hyvä poika, hyvä Vela. Täältä se piru löytyi. Näitä on tosi vaikea haistaa itse. Et jos ongelmia ilmenee, niin kannattaa ottaa vähän rohkeasti yhteyttä. Kuinka paljon olikaan täällä väkeä talossa?
Parisen sata.
Se on kato. Tää teidän kaista on melkoinen kinttupolku, että pannaanko nettiin lisää potkua vai potkastaanko puolet päästä pihalle? Näin, se oli vitsi. Ai.
Public use as well, so I shouldn't really use the word new age, I guess. Neo-new age perhaps. But nowadays these techniques are practiced within the general public and they have no idea the roots of it. They're exact same things that are used in darker occult groups too, Satanism, you know, whatever. And yeah, it is, I hate to say this, but it is things like meditation, yoga, and so on that does prime a person to. Now they would say you're opening your vibrations and you're raising your consciousness and you're contacting the spirit. You are getting in tune with your inner self, that we are all godlike and we all have, you know, all that. You kind of know the jargon, all of that. But unfortunately from teaching and from experience, I can, vouch for what Carolyn's saying and say, actually, this is demonic. And I can share examples of even what happened to myself to kind of highlight that.
Good stuff. Give us one of these examples, Lauren.
Sure. Well, I think basically, people might say, well, the third eye, it's in the the forehead. That's just it's near the crown chakra. But I would say, well, think again. Think, for example, about the Eye of Horus on the US dollar, also known as Eye of Satan or Lucifer. That is actually linked or akin to the third eye in a sense, because yes, it's the crown chakra on the forehead. But think about it. Masons use the Eye of Horus. They use other gods, Hindu gods, Egyptian gods, in their rituals because they know these entities are actually from Lucifer, disguised as angels of light or disguised as good, wholesome, benevolent gods.
So is that why you would say to people who are taking any of these activities and they feel better about themselves, would that almost be like the ultimate deception from the dark side?
Totally, because anything, the dark side does, it feels good because it's real. Supernatural experiences are real. So you feel really good if you meditate, you have blissful experiences, the forehead chakra might tingle, you might get healed, because Lucifer's an angel of light, and as Satan, he certainly can produce supernatural experiences, but they are a deception. And the reason, for example, when I actually left that movement and asked Jesus Christ into my heart, I soon discovered that I had demons, basically, and had them cast out. So it's very, very interesting because for example, the chakras and the pineal gland, if a Christian lays hands on you to cast out those demons and list those demons one by one, they will come out of the person. So that kind of says, you can't cast a demon out if there isn't one there. But if you lay your hand in the person's head or all the chakra points and command that demon to come out, it kind of speaks for itself.
Oh, it really does.
Sorry.
I want to go back to Carolyn at this point. Johnny, I see you want in here first.
Yeah, thanks, Kev. It was just about, you were saying these demons come out, Laura. Where did they go? Did it just go to the next unfortunate soul that they can find, or did they hang about there?
Right, okay, basically what happens is, they come out and they can try to attach to, for example, another family member, especially your offspring, because if you have taught your children to do that, then they have now a door open, as it were. And that's why it's important to cover yourself and your family with the blood of Jesus when you get deliverance prayer. But the Bible says they go into dry places or like the desert. What does that mean? Well, it's kind of symbolic of just going out into the atmosphere because they're no longer in a host. Obviously they've existed since before creation, and when they fell to earth, they've been here since day one, so they don't just disappear. They're generational. Obviously they follow the bloodline all down through the generations. So yeah.
You mentioned generational bloodlines, and this definitely leads me back to Carolyn, because I want to take you back to your childhood. And even at a very early age, I believe around about 2, you were being taught how to think outside of your own body and even get into other people's heads, were you not?
Yes, I was taught. Actually, I was really good at. Actually, I could read people's thoughts, and I thought everybody could. I really think that babies probably can, and they probably lose that as they get older. I don't know if that's a fact, but I'm thinking that babies are a lot more sensitive to the world around them than adults will give them credit for. And that's, maybe something that people need to, they should consider, that when a baby's crying, it may be just more than just, there may be a reason other than just the fact of a physical reason. And another reason why people need to know who Jesus Christ is, because if they have that spiritual covering that they can have through Jesus Christ, then they can have that protection over their something that people need to, they should consider, that when a baby's crying, it may be just more than just, there may be a reason other than just the fact of a physical reason. And another reason, their children. So back to thinking about outside of the box or above myself, or I was good at communicating with animals, but I was, in a way, I was scolded for this because I was told that was lower form of telepathic communication, that I was to take it up to the head center. We didn't call them chakras, at least that's not what they taught me. It was just head center, which was actually, didn't really call that part the third eye. That was even above that area, would be considered, I guess, the crown chakra. It was outside of the body. And that's what I was taught at, I can remember, as probably as young as 2 years old. And
what were they actually telling you about your body at that time, Carolyn? Was it kind of an irrelevant factor? Was it all about your consciousness?
There's different teachings about the body as someone progresses into the different levels. One of the teachings was that the body is a curse, and that you are to master the body. But yet, what the ascended masters and the demons, the demonic hierarchy, Satan's hierarchy, they love the body. And I found that out. I mean, it's just, when I got to the top level, I got to see exactly what they're like. They don't show everybody that. The body, they don't consider the body a curse. They want us to think the body's a curse. They want us to give up our control of our own body so they can enter in. And of course, the way they enter in is through the chakras and through the meditation. They want to hijack us. They're parasites. And so they don't, another thing about it is they don't have the spiritual authority they want people to think. We as humans, we were created, we're the king's kids. We're actually like created in God's likeness and image. We are different. We're different. We have an authority. Even the people that are not Christians have an authority that Satan and his spiritual hierarchy don't have. And especially if they give themselves, their lives to Jesus Christ, then they have the authority that given to them has been reconnected to them. I don't know how better to explain it. It's like it's simple, but yet it's not simple. It's just the simplest part is that we can be connected back to the creator of the universe, our Heavenly Father, our Father, and the authority, that spiritual authority, that when we can walk in that, more of that authority on the planet Earth. Christians don't understand the authority that they actually have through Jesus Christ. They think we're supposed to be whipped and slapped around by demons and Satan, that we're supposed to be doormats, and that's not true. So what Satan's organization is doing, the spiritual hierarchy, the ascended masters, it's all about the will. If people are familiar with the great invocation that is found through Lucius Trust, which used to be Lucifer Trust, there's a thing called the great invocation. That is an invoking of the demonic powers to overshadow people's wills. That's our will, our desire, our choice. It's deception to get us to be in agreement with what Satan wants. Satan's real. It's Lucifer. It's evil. It's to go along with Satan's plan. So it's all about the matter of will. So if we are in agreement, like so many people in today's world are in agreement with all the things that are demonic, that actually is furthering Satan's plan. So they have permission to carry out what they want, because we as humans still have dominion. But when we're in agreement with Satan, it's like we've given the car keys to Satan to drive us and to use us to get where he wants to go. And so if we surrender our agreement, our dominion to him, it gives him right, legal, spiritual right to have his way.
Wow. Joe, I'll bring you in at this point. You must be absolutely loving some of this information.
Oh, no, yeah, it's spot on. It's spot on as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's funny because you look at a lot of quote Christianity today, and they've gone so far off the mark of what Jesus was actually all about that it boggles my mind oftentimes that they call themselves Christians, because their actions don't speak it. You know, it's funny. Here you have the greatest activist to ever walk the face of the earth, ever. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, and I use that as a term. If you don't believe, just take it at that. There was a man, I believe, God in the flesh, but others can just say it was a man that changed the entire course of the planet. One man. There was no internet. There was nothing. And he changed it. Unbelievable, you know, what transpired over 2,000 years ago. And even before that, you know, the rich history of the earth, it's amazing how all this ties together. And folks, let me tell you, regardless if you believe it or not, it's real. Why? Because they believe. They believe. All these people that are after evil, that, you know, cater to these demons and are controlled by these demons, they believe it. They know it. So you should believe it, because if you don't, you're going to be sadly unprotected, and your guard, your flank's going to be exposed. And this is how they get you. So, I mean, this is spot on, Kev. I love what I'm hearing.
It really is. And I want to take Carolyn again. Sorry to keep pestering you here, Carolyn, but we're in your childhood. And I know that at an early age, you were even subjected to working for the military. Now, I believe that came around the age of 5. Now, I have to ask, because so many times we hear about these children who end up working with the military, for the military, mind control going on, and usually that's trauma-based. Was that something that you had to endure in your childhood?
Yes, I endured that.
And I'm really sorry for having to ask this, Carolyn, and if there's anywhere you don't want to go, feel free just to move on.
Okay. It could have even been, well, I could possibly have been a test tube baby. We could go as far back as that. There's so much I could say that I won't take time on this program, because even the conception. I mean, I had like a demonic overseer at the zygote stage, and I can't prove it. My mother never told me this, but when I look at the circumstances surrounding my birth and her pregnancy, it all seems possible that I may have been a test tube baby. I was born in 1953. My father had been used by the military. That's a whole other story. So my mother had been recruited into Satan's spiritual hierarchy when she was 16 years old. It's been in the bloodline, of course, you know, I mentioned that, but she had an ascended master appear to her when she was 16 and recruited her to work in the spiritual hierarchy. So that's the background, some of the background I came from. So it appears that maybe they had their hands on me even before the age of 4. What I can say is that I remember at about 4 years old, and it could be slightly earlier, I had some handlers that I had a husband and wife, an elderly couple that would take me places that was for like they would be considered like high-level Illuminati rituals. I had altars that would be used for some of these rituals. I actually inherited I inherited a position of like a priestess, a high order, even at that young age. It's just something you inherit through the bloodline. So at the same time, I was being taken at night, in the middle of the night, by two men. I believe pretty sure I know who they are. I mean, I'm not going to say who they are, but I mean, that's not really necessary. But I have lots of memories that were never, ever disassociated from me. They were real memories. I mean, they're all real memories, but I mean enough that it was not disassociated, where it wasn't like I just blank out and wouldn't remember things. I remember rituals. I remember some programming. I remember some of the memories have been recovered. It's if anybody wants to understand a little more about how that memory recovery happens, it's all a process of healing. It's just it's a after effect, or it's a consequence of the healing that God has taken me through. But there's some programs that I've done with Dr. Preston Bailey Jr. and Dan Duvall, and also my friend Lauren Grace. That the title of the programs are My Memories Real? And those can be found on Daniel Duvall's site. It's bridemovement.com, Bride Ministries. So if anybody's interested in listening to those, or go to YouTube and they can find them, you get more background information about how this works. But at one point, I was actually, because I was able to disassociate so easily and be programmed, and because I was intelligent. I guess I still am. Probably have a lot of brain cells that have been killed through the years. But I mean, as a little kid, they test people that are in the bloodline to find out what they excel at. Well, I must have excelled at a lot of things other than just the supernatural, because I was used where I would have, I guess what some people call it is like a mind file. I carried codes and some information for projects. Some of the projects actually had to do with things that are happening today in today's world.
I mean, who's going to suspect a kid, Carol?
That's it. People thought I was a decoy if they ever saw me. Like in a group where I would go somewhere, I would be with a man that I called Daddy. That was it. It didn't matter. A lot of times it was somebody in the military. That man was the decoy. I actually had the code when sometimes they would think that I was the decoy, or I was the one that was to appear like it's a normal daddy little girl. But in fact, I was the one that carried the codes.
They always say it's the one that you least suspect.
Yeah.
Don't they?
They wouldn't have expected a little girl like me, that's for sure. And that's why they used me. And because I just was easy for them to program for that. And I wanted to please. So that was part of it. And I believed in I really liked some of the men that I was sent with. And as far as I know, they didn't abuse me sexually. I mean, I was involved in some of that as a kid. That's another section.
Carol, as a child, were you rewarded when you done well? Is that why you felt good when you were helping these people?
The only reward I can remember is love. It was something like that, like praising me, or there was one particular man that, since I didn't have, I was separated from my biological father when I was 1.5 years old, and that's a whole nother, that's a tragedy. That's another story that has to do with my father and what happened to him. But I guess it was a little girl wanting a father, and so if I had a man that was like a father that showed me love, then that was a reward. I don't remember any other reward.
I first became aware of eToro on the BBC documentary. I remember logging on that evening and opening an account and started trading that evening, I believe. The main features of the website that helped me specifically in trading are the live feeds and the charts. to be one of the best traders on eToro. It's a big achievement.
Give me love, then that was a reward. I don't remember any other reward other than that, but it's like on another level, there I had altars that were tortured, and I was threatened. If you tell what's happened, or you try to tell anybody what's going on, we will not only kill you. It didn't bother me so much if they said they're going to kill me. It's if they said they were going to kill my loved ones, my mother, my brothers,
psychological fear.
And also with animals, this is not uncommon. This is a typical thing for them to torture animals, and that also to torture other kids. Is if you do not obey us, we will kill your friend here, or we will. They find out for each person what's gonna work for them. And in fact, I did have an altar that didn't work with, so they had to deal with that particular altar totally different than the others.
How many altars do you think you actually had at one point?
Oh,
could there even still be some that's repressed?
There could be. I've pretty much integrated. There are different types of altars. I had a couple of very strong altars that were big chunks of me, and those have been integrated. One was named Andrew, and one was Candace, and those were used in the early 1970s. They were actually, I was in agreement with making those altars, but they were a large part of me, and were used as they were actually mob loyal altars. So those have been integrated, and I'm a better person, a stronger person for it now. Now, sometimes altars, there are many, many, many altars that can be created like carbon copies of one type of an altar. That'd be like splits, but they don't have any particular personality. They're just used like as blank. Let's see, I don't know a whole lot about computer programming, but it would be like a blank slate that can be programmed later and used. And
just like an avatar.
I guess
something that could be an avatar left for later if they need some other personality to come through. But we've got a couple of minutes before the break, and somebody asked a really good question in the chat. And Laura, I'll come back to you here, because somebody was asking, where is God when all this is going on?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I understand why people ask that. Well, basically, he is always there, and it is a supernatural battle that is taking place. Going back to what we know about the Garden of Eden, it is Satan does want people's souls, but we know also that those who turn to Jesus Christ, he will set them free from all of that, and myself and Carolyn and so many others can testify to that. So
it's a big question, Laura. I know it really was a really hard question to sum up in 1 minute, but we are almost on the break, and of course we're going for 3 hours tonight, so don't go anywhere after the break. Myself, Johnny, Joe, we'll have Laura and Carolyn all going on for another 2 hours on Down the Rabbit Hole. Unfortunately, Popeye has got an emergency going on just now, but the team and family that we are here on TFR, we are going to take over his slot, Joe.
We're going to Shanghai his show.
It's tinfoil Thursday, man, and this is getting too much of a habit, me on
it's
here.
It's a pirate attack, that's right. See, Popeye isn't really the sailor that he says he is. He's Department of Transportation.
You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Well, not quite. This is Kev from the Kev Baker Show. I am the same small stature as the Popeye, don't have the same facial furniture, but I can assure you that for the next 2 hours, while we go down Popeye's rabbit hole, we will give you the very best of information, and we will make this a show that Popeye himself would be very, very proud of. Now, to all the new listeners tuning in who didn't hear the first hour over on the Kev Baker Show, we've got Joe Joseph here tonight. We've got my good friend and co-host from the Kev Baker Show, the one and only Johnny Whistles. And tonight we're joined by an ex-Illuminist and a Bloodline member, Carolyn Hamlet. And we also have the KBS spiritual warrior princess, Laura Maxwell. Now then, they are here tonight exposing the New World Order Luciferian plan. And I want to come to you first of all, Joe, because before the break I really was out of order. I threw poor Laura an absolutely horrendous question and gave her about 45 seconds to try and answer it. But Joe, the audience were asking, and I'm asking as well, where is God when all of this is going on? Because I always heard that light triumphed over dark. Surely he could just ride in and save the day.
No, it's not. I don't think that's what this existence is about, though. See, people look at it kind of through self-centered eyes, because that's kind of where society's been kind of, funneled down this path, more and more of the Western world, if you will. I have to say that if you look at what all the ancients say, and you can't be closed-minded, you got to look at everything in its totality. And basically what you come to find out is all of these different cultures were basically all in agreement that this life, this existence is a trial. You're put here and basically given these obstacles, if you will, but you choose the obstacles because God gave us free will. It's a beautiful thing. And we have to go through life and get to the other end and make it. Some are going to make it. Most are not. Bible says that, narrow is the gate and straight is the way that leads to salvation, and few be there that find it. And I'm probably butchering it to death. But I know that wide is the path that leads to, the other way. I don't want to go that way.
Why are you always so wise and got together and kind of
chat room, in the days of Noah.
Here he goes. Cha-ching. Cha-ching. That should be a drinking game in itself. It really should. Talking drinking games. Sarah Palin will send one out there, Joe. So
very good.
A little drink. But of course,
just getting warmed up now. But seriously,
Tinfoil Thursday, man.
Tinfoil Thursday. But seriously, there are vessels made for good, vessels made for bad. We're all vessels, right? Our paths are different. But humanity has this bad habit of saying that we need to standardize everything, right? Take a look at public school in the United States or primary school over in the UK. Everything's standard, right? They box us in. You go into a cinder block classroom and you learn the same stuff. Even though you're wired differently, everybody's unique. Everybody has different talents. God has given us all different talents and different skill sets and different personalities, like a fingerprint. No two people are the same. And so why do we think that it's okay and that it's the norm to teach everybody the exact same way? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of where I'm from, or where I come from, is that, look, this is our journey, this is our path. Look, we're going to either make it or we don't. I'm going to try and make it. And I think the best way to do it is just by shining that light, be a positive force in the world, and don't back down to darkness. And the best way to do it is not putting your faith in anything human, because inevitably humanity will let you down every time. But that higher power has a way of getting you through even your darkest moments. Trust me.
That higher power even has a way of manifesting itself on occasion. I want to go back to Carolyn here, because you, at a very early age, I believe, had an experience that was quite profound. Could you share that with us, Carolyn?
Yes, I've had